The golden throne is cold and bright, a beacon in the endless night. 10,000 years of iron sleep, a billion souls who watch and weep.
Welcome to Warhammer 40k Lore in the Bible, where I pull from Warhammer 40k lore to help explain biblical lore. And today we're going over the Imperial Tithe. And on the biblical side of things, we're going to be tackling a sacred cow and how wrong the mainstream doctrines get it. But anyways, I also do react videos to Warhammer 40k lore and with the biblical veneer to it. But the way these work, these lore videos, is that we get into the Warhammer 40k lore first, then we get into the biblical side of things. So that way you get the picture and then you can kind of understand what's going on in the biblical side of things. And I usually round back to Warhammer 40k lore at the end, but this time there's just not much to go on here. So we're just going to get it done right at the beginning. Anyways, let's get this started. The Imperial Tithe, also called the Grand Harvesting, Great Tithe, or Terra's Due, refers to the amount of materials an imperial world must supply to the administratum. And guys, take the wikis and the lexicanums with a grain of salt, okay? They definitely get a lot of things wrong, and if I miss something, put it in the comments and I will pin it. But anyways, two types of tithes are demanded of imperial worlds. The first is a military tithe, requiring 1/10 of a planet's PDF being gathered as new recruits for the Imperial Guard. That's Planetary Defense Force, by the way. The second, known as exacta, includes all other types of resources or wealth. Collection of the first type of tithe is overseen by the Departamento Munitorum, while collection of the second is overseen by the Departamento Exacta. Tithes are physically collected by the administratum authorities, successors of the Crusade-era exactors, which periodically arrive on the subject world. The frequency of visits varies world to world, but in at least one case in the Departamento Munitorum, visited a planet 9 times in a year, demanding a new Imperial Guard conscripts each time. The size of the tithe depends on the type of world which is applied. A tithe can be any form of material, food, weapons, minerals, people, etc. Despite the number of agencies tracking tithes, the sheer size of the Imperium and the difficulty of warp travel makes the time-consuming process of tithe collection excessively confusing and inefficient. It is the duty of the planetary governors to ensure the tithe of their world is paid, and any world that fails to pay its tithe meets with vicious reprisal from the Adeptus Terra. At the slightest breach of protocol, imperial officials will often order the Adeptus Arbites to immediately execute the governor. However, as long as the planetary ruler dutifully pays his world's tithe, he may rule the planet in almost any way he sees fit. Okay. Tithe exemptions. Space Marine homeworlds. Planets belonging to the Ecclesiarchy, Night Worlds, and Forge Worlds of the Adeptus Mechanicus are not usually subject to imperial tithes, and are given the tithe grade Aptus Non. Though Space Marines must provide a separate tithe in gene seed to the administratum. Certain worlds which supply large amount of psychers to the black ships of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica are also known to be exempt from the standard tithe. However, even worlds exempt from imperial tithe are not always exempt from scrutiny or collections. The Sisters of Silence are known to gather blanks from worlds normally immune to the demands of tithe. So tithe grades. The tithe grade below are generally applied to worlds depending on their world's classification. However, the tithe grade assigned to a world by the Adeptus Administratum can vary depending on a variety of other factors. Orbis Cassi, used after a world is of no further use to the Imperium. Aptus Non, also Adeptus Non, the lowest. Solutio Tertius, Solutio Prima, Solutio Extremis. Decuma Particular, Exactus Tertius, Exactus Prima, Exactus Particular, Exactus Extremis, and Experima highest. So there you go. And that's pretty much the imperial tithe. So now we're going to get into the biblical side of things here. And right now I want to read what God says when you have a king over them, a human king, what's going to happen. Okay, starting in verse 11, or 1 Samuel 8, starting in verse 11. And he said, "This will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself, for his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and shall run before his chariots. And he will appoint him captains over thousands and captains over fifties, and will set them to ear his ground, and to reap his harvest, to make his instruments of war, and instruments of his chariots. And he will take your daughters to be confectionaries, and to be cooks, and to be bakers. And he will take your fields, and your vineyards, and your olive yards, even the best of them, and give them to his servants. And he will take the tenth of your seed, and of your vineyards, and give to his officers, and to his servants. And he will take your manservants, and your maidservants, and your goodliest young men, and your asses, and put them to his work." Starting to see what's going on here, right? "He will take the tenth of your sheep, and ye shall be his servants. And ye shall cry out in that day because of your king, which ye shall have chosen you, and the Lord will not hear you in that day." Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, "Nay, but we will have a king over us." So they had a chance to have God as their king. But yet, tell me where's the lie in that? Right? This is exactly what goes on today, right? But very interesting. All right. So I want to start out with this, right? Or actually, we won't do that one just yet because we're going to see how they conscripted military men, right? So Numbers 31, 3 through 6. "And Moses spake unto the people, saying, Arm some of yourselves unto the war, and let them go against the Midianites, and avenge the Lord of Midian. Of every tribe 1,000, throughout all the tribes of Israel, shall ye send to the war. So there were delivered out of the thousands of Israel 1,000 every tribe, 12,000 armed for war. And Moses sent them to the war, 1,000 of every tribe, them and Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the priest." Did you hear that? "To the war, with holy instruments and trumpets to blow in his hand." So even priests went to war. So very interesting. Okay. And then, of course, we have this when Saul was king. So 1 Samuel 14:52. "And there was sore war against the Philistines all the days of Saul." And this goes with what God just said with the king. If you have a king over you, right? "And when Saul saw any strong man or valiant man, he took him unto him." Right? All right. Because that's how they conscripted, men of war and stuff like that, right? Anyways, Matthew 24:4. So I want to, Christians, take this to mind, okay? Or really anybody, atheist, whatever. Matthew 24:4. "And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ." Now, if it was saying that these people will say that they are Christ, it would have said, they will say that they are the Christ. It doesn't say that. Jesus is speaking in first person here. "For many shall come in my name," in the name of Jesus, "saying, I am Christ," saying that Jesus is the Messiah, "and shall deceive many." Put that as a note in your head here, because we know that the tithe is very big in the Christian church, right? First off, that tithe that they talk about, it's funny. They'll say the law of God is done away with, but not the tithe. That's still in effect, even though it's not. First off, it was food. And we're going to see that. It was food, and it was to feed the poor and the Levites, because the Levites didn't have an inheritance. That's what the tithe was for. We're going to see that here, okay? And real quick, I do want to say this, because I'm not saying don't give to your church or whatever, right? But it does say give to God where he puts his name and where he tells you to put it, right? And that it's not out of necessity. So if a church is telling you, you got to pay your tithe, 1/10, that's bullcrap. They're lying to you. So 2 Corinthians 9:7, every man according as he purposeth in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver. Now, here we go. Now we're going to see what it's all for and what it is, what the tithe is. Deuteronomy 14, starting in 22. Thou shalt truly tithe all the increase of thy seed, that the field bringeth forth year by year. And thou shalt eat before the Lord thy God in the place which he shall choose to place his name there. The tithe of thy corn, of thy wine, of thine oil, and the firstlings of thy herds and the flocks, and that thou mayest learn to fear the Lord thy God always. And we'll get more into this, but I want to bring this up first. Why was there a tithe? So Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 28 and 29. At the end of 3 years thou shalt bring forth all the tithe of thine increase the same year, and shalt lay it up within thy gates. Ready? And the Levite, because he hath no part or nor inheritance with thee, and the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow, which are within thy gates, shall come and shall eat and be satisfied, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all thy work of thine hand which thou doest. But guess what? We don't have a Levitical system anymore. And I'll show you why here in a second. But it's for the Levites because they have no part nor inheritance with thee. So they don't make any money. They don't own any land. They don't own any animals. So you would tithe to them, and they would store it up in their storehouses, and they would feed the people, the poor, everybody who needed it. It's that simple. Would be nice if we had a system like that nowadays, wouldn't it? And imagine how many pastors and priests or whatever would do the job if they weren't getting paid. Just saying. But that's what it is. That's the tithe. And we'll get even more into that because it says you can spend it. Like if you can't make it, you can spend it on strong drink or whatever your heart desires. So let's finish this one. Okay. So the oil and the firstlings of the herds flock mayst learn to fear the Lord thy God always. And if the way be too long for thee, so that art not able to carry it, or if the place be too far from thee, which the Lord thy God shall choose to set his name there, then the Lord thy God hath blessed thee. Then shalt thou turn it into money, bind up the money in thine hand, and shalt go into the place which the Lord thy God shall choose. Again, not your pastor, God, where God tells you to put it. Okay, and thou shalt bestow that money for whatsoever thy soul lusteth after, for oxen, or for sheep, or for wine, or for strong drink, alcohol, or for whatsoever thy soul desireth, and thou shalt eat there before the Lord thy God, and thou shalt rejoice, thou and thine household. Now, and thy Levite that is within thy gates, thou shalt not forsake him, for he hath no part nor inheritance with thee. So then it goes into what we were just talking about. At the end of 3 years, thou shalt bring forth all the tithe of thine increase the same year, blah, 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 blah. So there you go. So if you can't make it, you can spend money, which is still helping everybody there, right? The Levites and all that. And you could turn into money and buy strong drink. Throw a party. Now, why is it done away with? Now, here's another porky that we've been sold as Christians, that this is the beast of Revelation here. This is the Antichrist doing this. But do you see something wrong here? It doesn't say a covenant, it says the covenant, which is the covenant between God and his people. So Daniel 9:27, this is Jesus doing this, okay? He shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. What did Jesus do? He done away with the Levitical system. So there's no need for these sacrifices and all that. He did away with it. He's the lamb. He's the final lamb of God, right? Okay. And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation. And that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. This is Jesus, folks. Jesus is the one who did away with the sacrifice and the oblation. Right? We are at here. Right here. We are after the order of Melchizedek now, which is king and priest. I don't know if I'll spell it right here, but oh well, it should get it. Okay. Hebrews 7:17. For he testifieth, thou art a priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek. For there is verily a disannulling of the commandment going before the weakness and unprofitableness thereof. For the law made nothing perfect, but the bringing of a better hope did, by which we draw nigh unto God, inasmuch as not without an oath he was made priest. So now we know that. Let's read this. Oh, and then we'll get into the way, the church tells us that if you tithe, God is going to bless you. But God says the opposite of that. And we'll see here. But anyways, we're right here. He shall cause the sacrifice of oblation to cease. Jesus Christ. Okay. That's the better hope, right? That verse is talking about. Okay. Genesis 28:22. And this stone, which I have set for a pillar, shall be God's house. And of all that thou shalt give me, I will surely give the 10th unto thee, or God. So God blesses you, and then you give a 10th, right? To a house or a church or somebody who's edifying you and giving you the truth, and God moves you to doing that. Not out of necessity, right? We go back to this, we're right here. Every man according as his purpose in his heart. So let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loveth the cheerful giver. And there's 1:2 where he says, let me see if I can find it here. I don't know if this will find it or not. Okay. Yeah, I can't find it. Okay. Anyways, you guys get the gist there. We're not commanded, to give a 10th of your goods, right? And nowhere does it say, God's going to bless you after you give, right? What I call the greed seed, right? Just sow that seed and God will bless you. That's crap, right? Plus, they say, the law is done away with. And real quick, let's bring this up. Here's Jesus saying this. Right here. Yes, right here. John 14:50. If ye love me, keep my commandments. Now it says, if you love me, not if you want to be saved, keep my commandments. It says, if you love me, keep my commandments. You know, those 10 commandments that God gave on Mount Sinai. You know, don't cheat on your wife, don't lie, don't steal, don't covet your neighbor's goods, right? You know, all that stuff. It should be automatic, right? But you'll hear a lot of people say that all that's done away with, right? But here's Jesus saying, if you love me, keep my commandments. Not the Levitical way of doing that. The Levitical way is done away with, right? Jesus done away with that. So even that tithe and giving your tenth of food, right? Basically the tithe was food. That's really what it was. So the Levites can be fed and have sacrifices for people who were poor and stuff like that, who couldn't afford and didn't have farmland, right? And what's interesting is that the farmers had to cut off some part of their land to where travelers and the poor could eat from. It would be cool if we had that today. But anyways, guys, we're going to wind it down here. This is kind of a short one. And I hope you guys enjoyed this and got something from this, because unfortunately, we're sold a porky on this. And so many people, they're not tithing to honor God. They say they're honoring God, but really they're afraid of being poor. Because the church will literally say that. If you don't give your 10% tithe, God's going to make you poor. That's crap. But anyways, guys, I could rant on and on about that. So anyways, I want to thank everybody who liked the video. If you disliked the video, thank you for at least giving me a chance. Also, guys, I have my memberships going, just $5 a month, and they will always be $5. I was thinking maybe doing tiers, but just $5. $5 is enough. So you'll have access to my Discord, and also I'm going to be doing videos to where you guys can ask me questions. We could play games together, do trivia stuff, or whatever. You know, something to give you guys a bang for your buck. You know, so it's worth, giving your money for a membership. But anyways, guys, thank you, and you guys have a wonderful day.